Good morning to the beloved lecturer and also all my teammates. My name is Wana Husna, and today I'm going to present my part about land law, which is indivisibility of title. So before we go into details, I am going to explain what does it mean by indivisibility. So what does indivisibility means? As the author wrote, it is a measure of conclusiveness given to the estate or interest in alienated land or registration of the appropriate dwelling in statutory form. However, there are conditions in order to obtain indivisible title, such as system of title or interest registration. So basically, if you are under the title of indivisibility, it is quite hard for you to revoke your land because your land uh, is not possible to revoke, except for under a few circumstances. I'm going to explain this later. So moving on, I'm going to move on with the next slide. So the author also explained the history and the concept behind indivisibility. So the basis of the Torrent system is that title is obtained from the execution of the statutory instrument, but from its registration. So this will affect the party in whose approved that registration, and it will secure indivisibility title or interest in the state land. So as a concept and the basis of foreign system. That is why we have indivisibility. So an important concept as stated in National Land Code is that this means that once an interest such as ownership is registered in the title deed, it is a good against the whole world. So the state guarantees interest. So if you are under the title of indivisibility, it protects and also guarantees your interest and also your title onto land. So the registered title or real property determines who has a property interest of ownership of such property, as mentioned in section 340. So, for example, if you wanted to buy a land and you wanted it to be unrevocable. So you have to deal with the owner of the land in order to gain that title, as mentioned under section 340. So, however, indivisibility does not imply in fraud, misrepresentation, forgery, because indivisibility is something that you cannot be revoked, you cannot be taken. The land is permanent. So, as it if it happens between fraud, misrepresentation, and forgery, is another title. So I'm going to explain about Section 40, Clause 1. It mentioned that the title or interest of any person or body for the time being being registered as proprietors of any land in or in whose name any lease, charge of easement is for the time being registered shall subject to the other provision is the same section be invisible. So, whenever a person has the power over a land, it is booked. So that is why fraud and misrepresentation forgery does not apply in this because the land is unrevoked. So you cannot actually susukati tarik the land because it is under title of indivisible. Um, so I'm going to move on to the next point. So the author also explained between two type of indivisibility, which is immediate and deferred. And I'm going to explain two of them, and I'm going to explain what makes it different. So immediate invisibility occurs or explains as when a purchaser's name is registered in the title deed. So invisibility may be lost only if that timelessly before title is transferred to bona fide purchaser for a value without notice of the vitiating factor. So bona fide defines as good value or good faith. So uh, immediate invisibility means immediate ownership. I mean immediate land ownership. So it only happens when a purchaser's name is registered in the title deed, and 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 you can lose invisibility uh, if you are actually not a bona fide or and it has to transfer to someone with a good value. So um, so moreover, stating in section 42 of the Federated Malaysian State Code, they also introduced different indivisibility. So what does it mean? So as the slide presented, the inability of an efficient or void instrument to give title. So the free invisibility is actually tarik balik or revoke the title of indivisibility because it is an inefficient or void instrument to give title. So maybe he or the person or the party has involved in misrepresentation of fraud. So that is why we apply different indivisibility. So he is not capable to actually have the title. So if competing claims between the original owner and a subsequent purchaser in good faith and for valid bill consideration, the latter would be entitled to the property of ownership. So I'm going to explain. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, so for example, Party A acquires the title to the property by fraud. Soon, Party A transfer the property to Party B. However, B's title to the property is protected and cannot be set aside if B acquires in good faith and for valuable consideration. This also protects successes in the title and interest of Party B. So, as this um, example share is like if a party A acquires either by fraud, they can actually transfer it to party B, but it requires good faith and valuable consideration. So that is why this is how the court or the court actually determines who actually have the power to the land. So last but not least, I'm going to explain the case that is written in the article. So we are looking at the case of Kamal Zaman bin Omar and others. So this case is about fraud case and it's all about indivisibility. So the fact of the case summarized when a company was by a fraud transfer registered as a proprietor of land belonging to co-proprietors who were outstated from the registering dealing. So what happened was the federal court also held that the title company became an immediate purchaser when it was registered as proprietor and wanted this title acquired was tainted with forgery and fraud, it was divisible. So as I mentioned earlier, indivisible does not include in fraud and misrepresentation because of this case. So that is why the interest was held to be indivisible because it was acquired in good faith and for valuable consideration. So the the federal court also declared the doctrine of deferred indivisibility in Malaysia and the highlight of Section 340, Clause 3 on of the National Land Court is applicable only to a subsequent bona fide purchaser for valuable consideration. So as this case explains about a fraud case, basically Kamlo Zaman or other party, was involved in a fraud case and the federal court has determined, who has bona fide, who has the power to actually um, make this land indivisible. So hence the explanation of this whole case. So I think that's all for today. So I'm going to conclude. I'm going to conclude my point by saying that um, indivisible of title is actually very, very vital in this country. And for me as a human being and for me as a future lawyer, I am going to focus more on this title in order, for future planning. So I think that's it for today. And thank you so much for listening. And